Okay, today's article is called The New England Colonies and Native Americans. And it is a history article, text from National Geographic. And this follows up on all of chapter 1 from our textbook. We were learning earlier this year about Native Americans, and we played a Cheyenne Odyssey and learned about Native Americans. So this is following up on that. We're going to go back to Native Americans for a little while. All right, and so here we see, to begin the article, a map. Now the title says the New England Colonies, but what we see here looks like to be a map of the states of New England, because Maine wasn't a colony, it was part of Massachusetts, and because New York isn't part of New England. So let's see what it says. It says a map that shows the states, in New England: Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. All right. So, an overview. Well, that's interesting. Normally, Newsela does not have a title for their introductions, but here it does. That's different. The first English settlers and Native Americans tried to be good neighbors. They shared a common interest in trading and spiritual life. Yet, this relationship soon fell apart because of disease and other problems. Eventually, the two sides went to war. That's right. The colonists in New England went to war with the Native Americans who lived there first. This section is called Complex History. The story of Thanksgiving is a long-lasting American legend. In 1621, pilgrims sat down with the local Wampanoag Indians. Together, they celebrated the first successful harvest. It sounds like a great story. Two cultures came together and shared the bounty of the land. However, the history between colonists and the local Native American tribes is not so simple. There was trade and cooperation, but also bloody conflict. So this paragraph does recall what we already know about the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving and the Wampanoag, but then at the end it adds this new thing about the bloody conflict, which we might not be aware of. This part of history is not told quite as often or known quite as well as the first Thanksgiving. So this section is called Finding Common Ground, and it comes with a illustration and a long caption. So let's blow the illustration up. And here we see, let's see, what do we see? It says Massasoit creates deal with Pilgrims, 1621. Massasoit Sachem, or Usemequin, was born in 1581 and died in 1661. He lived to be 80 years old. He was the leader of the Wampanoag Confederacy. Massasoit helped the Pilgrims from starvation when they started their colony. So that's the Pilgrims, and that's Massasoit. This is a drawing of what it could have looked like, although we're not sure exactly what it looked like. All right, so I'm going to shrink this picture back down. Let's read this section. The first English settlers arrived in New England in the 1600s. About 60,000 Native Americans were already living there. At first, the two sides fought over territory. Still, colonists were able to build thriving colonies with the help of the Native Americans. Trade was one of the first bridges between the colonists and local Native Americans. The colonists needed their help in order to survive and prosper in the New World. For their part, the Native Americans were interested in building alliances. That's like friendships, partnerships. Because of this economy based on trade, Plymouth Colony was able to support itself within 5 years. And that's saying something. Both sides benefited from trade and bartering. Bartering is trading. I'll give you this if you give me that. I'll give you 5 pelts for 6 of these, or 10 of these for 1 of those. The Native Americans provided skins, hides, food, knowledge, and other crucial materials and supplies. The settlers traded beads and other goods. Ideas were traded alongside physical goods. Physical goods are things you can touch and hold. Wampum was a type of currency used like money. However, it sometimes carried religious meaning as well. The first Bible printed in the New World was actually in the Algonquin language. The communication between the colonists and the Native Americans was not just political or practical. It was spiritual as well. Isn't that interesting? Did you know that the first Bible ever printed in the New World in North America, it was printed not in English, but in Algonquin? Huh. Isn't that fascinating? Let's take a look at this picture here. Native Americans and Europeans on the banks of a river. It looks like, let's see, it says Henry Hudson, trading with Native Americans on the shore, 1609. Hudson was an explorer who traveled the Hudson River. It is named after him. The Hudson River is a river that separates, I believe it's the one that goes right near and empties out right at New York City, and it goes through New York. So this is near New England. Okay, here we go. Puritan Christianity was the main religion of New England colonies. Over time, some colonists began to move away from Puritanism. Their ideas about Native Americans also changed. A famous example of this is Roger Williams. He rebelled against Puritanism and began the colony of Rhode Island. Williams believed that colonists should buy the land from the Native Americans. They had no right to take it for free. So maybe that means that the Puritans did believe they could take it for free, that God told them it was theirs, and therefore they could just take it without paying the natives. So you could tell Roger Williams thought it was important to treat the Native Americans more fairly. Over time, however, relations between the colonies and the local tribes began to break apart. The colonists carried diseases like smallpox over from England. The Native Americans had no natural defenses, no immunity. That's what natural defenses are, immunity, against the illnesses, and many tribes were wiped out. Some colonial leaders believed the disease outbreaks were an act of God. They said God supported their right to the land. They used this to convert the natives to Christianity and move them to praying towns. So the scare of being sick from smallpox was enough to convert some natives to believe in God. And that's how the colonists used it, as a belief that God said, hey, this is our land now. That's why he's killing all of you. That was the belief of some colonial leaders. Some, not all. All right, this section is called the First Indian War. Colonist-Native American relations worsened over the course of the 1600s. That says 17th century, but that's the 1600s. It led to the First Indian War, or King Philip's War. The war began in 1675. The government of Plymouth Colony killed 3 members of the Wampanoag tribe. The Wampanoag leader, Philip, also known as Metacom, retaliated. He led an army made up of Wampanoags and other tribes to attack the settlements. Some tribes, including the Mohegans and the Mohawks, fought on the side of the English colonists. The war lasted for 14 months. That's a year and 2 months, ending in late 1676. Both sides suffered many deaths and injuries. Historians consider it one of the deadliest conflicts in American history. Thousands of Native Americans died in war or from illness. They were taken as slaves or fled to other regions. More than 600 colonists died, and dozens of settlements were destroyed. And it doesn't say here, but Metacom, otherwise known as King Philip, that was his nickname that the colonists gave him. He was the son of Massasoit, the same Massasoit who helped the Pilgrims. His son led the natives against those same European colonists in this bloody war. How things can change, huh? The history of New England colonies reflects the history of America. It's a two-sided tale. Native and immigrant cultures came together to create the modern United States, but the two sides also clashed, and many suffered. That's the end of the article. It's now your turn. Either read it again on your own, or read it again with me, and then thoughtfully take the quiz. All right, do your best, and I can't wait to see how you do.